Hey everyone, this is Nick and welcome back to the Linux and open source news show, where this week we've got a study saying that maybe vibe coding and AI tools are actually killing the open source model that we know right now. We also have System76 showcasing a nice big roadmap for their Cosmic desktop. We've got an unfortunate delay for the Steam Frame and the Steam Machine. We've got more EU bodies and countries looking towards open source, or at least moving away from big tech, and a bunch of other things, including this message from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by SquareSpace. They are your all-in-one platform to create, publish, and manage your own website. They have really super easy tools to create your online presence, whether you know how to code or not. So they have what they call their blueprint system, which lets you pick from a variety of templates that are pre-built and will suit any type of website, whether you're looking for a simple blog, an online store, a video platform, whatever. All these templates are also optimized to give you solid SEO, and they even have a bunch of SEO tools that you need to make sure that your website doesn't end up in the last page of Google search results. On top of that, to go further, Squarespace has their own design engine to create your own pages. You can just drag and drop elements where you want them, and you can change the colors, the fonts, and just tweak the template however you want, or you can automate all of this. And once you have something you like, you can add extra features like creating your own online shop with a payment system that handles credit cards, PayPal, Apple Pay, and more. You can even design your own logo from Squarespace and book your own domain name. So check out squarespace.com/TheLinuxExperiment, or just click the link in the description and you'll get 10% off your first website or domain purchase. So this week we got a new European study saying that the current practice of vibe coding, meaning letting an AI generate most of the code for you, this is killing open source code. What they mean by that is that the AI tools are based on open source code. They trained on all the available public repos that they could find to try and understand how code is built and what it does, often without authorization from the projects. What's the issue with that? Well, these projects that the AI used are community projects. They require people to use them, to share them, to add to them, to fix issues in them, and that is something humans need to do, with the most important factor, of course, being monetary support. With vibe coding, you don't really know what the code you're generating is based on, and it lets people completely bypass the usual open source software chain, which the study says is just not financially viable. They even go further, saying vibe coding itself is not economically sustainable, because of course you're using code through an AI, which means it lowers the amount of money and exposure that gets to open source projects, which in turn means that a lot of these projects will no longer see development, they will no longer see progress, contributions, and it also means that those AI tools will have increasingly fewer projects to pilfer to train their models, and they'll have to train on their own code. And as we've seen with a bunch of LLMs, when you train on your own AI's results, the results get worse over time, noticeably worse. Projects are already starting to be affected by this vibe coding trend. For example, Tailwind CSS had to lay off 3 of their 4 engineers because traffic to their documentation dropped 40%. Meaning people don't see any callbacks to the potential commercial options of Tailwind, which are in their documentation. Thus, Tailwind gets way less revenue to keep developing their solution. The study says that vibe coders simply do not contribute back to the free and open source projects that they unknowingly used to generate the code. AI tools have reduced the cost of software development for everyone, but it also means that what little money remains is transferred to AI tools that did not pay the open source projects that they used to train their AI models. So the money doesn't go to open source projects at all, and they were already struggling for funding. The study proposes a revenue sharing model based on usage data. They say we have the technology to know that and to be able to work out a model, but I'm not exactly sure how you would do that. They also say the most popular projects will still find sponsors, but the smaller projects will not. And this means that there are less chances of getting a new Linux or a new Git, basically a project that starts small but explodes onto the scene, because those small projects just won't get their shot. And I can only agree with the sentiment and with the conclusions here. Open source is a community-based system. It requires notoriety for a project, it requires human interaction, human contribution, and if no one knows that they're using code from an open source project, even through the medium of an AI generating code, then you just won't contribute to anything, you won't try to fix things, you won't try to contribute a feature that was missing for your own use cases, and so those projects will just wither and end up not existing anymore. Now, of course, the study doesn't seem to address the fact that you could use an AI to do some vibe coding and then open source the results of that vibe coding session, thus creating a new open source project. But this also has problems because the AI that people will keep using will train on your vibe-coded project, which will be AI generated, even though you can, of course, fix issues and still contribute manual code amidst what the AI generated, and the AI will learn from its own code. And also your vibe-coded project will just not really see any exposure, any notoriety, any contributions, because people are just using an AI to access the code that you made and generate something that is based on what you created, which means you might open source all the code that the AI generated for you, or that you tweaked and configured and amended, but it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things because your project is not going to take off at all. Now this week, System76 gave a few details on their plans beyond the current weekly updates that we've seen to Cosmic, namely what they call Epoch 2 and Epoch 3, Epoch being the general name for their major versions. Epoch 2 will bring some solid updates to the desktop's foundations. They will let people edit input methods, they will add an animation framework to build better and animated apps, they will add better debugging tools, they will also add hot reloading of the desktop's foundational libraries, again for the developers' benefits. They also want to bring rendering optimizations to reduce the CPU usage of the desktop by using the GPU for more stuff, including GPU multi-threading. This would be achieved by moving to a Vulkan renderer instead. They want to build the foundations for their syncing service, so you could sync your configurations between multiple devices that run Cosmic, and they also want to let you configure how notifications appear and what they do. They want an app tray that works per workspace, they want a better clipboard manager integrated with their syncing feature, presumably to let you copy something on one PC and paste it on another. Finally, Epoch 2 would include more printer settings, more window management options, letting you name your workspaces, but also improvements to screen reader support, dynamic wallpapers, and all of that jazz. As per Epoch 3, it would be more of a visual and polish release, so animations would appear across the desktop for workspace switching, for logging in, for opening apps, closing apps, clicking applets, basically everything that should have an animation to let you know what's happening, they're gonna add it there. They also want to add HDR support, they want to add nightlight, they want to add better gamepad support, also session save and restore through the Wayland protocol that does that. They want to change the notification design so they are less intrusive and they look nicer. They want to have more theming options for shaders, for wallpapers, for accent colors. They want to let you sync your accent color with your potential hardware LEDs, all of that stuff. And in terms of applications, they would also add better file management features, customization for the terminal, spell checking where you input text, a system monitor, and more themes and applications, of course. I think it is a solid roadmap, but I think it is also inverted in the order where they should release things. The main problem with Cosmic is currently kind of a lack of features and a lack of polish. I personally can't really stick with it. I tried it for a month, but the lack of animations breaks my brain. I am a very visual person. I need to see something being minimized. I need to see something expand. I need to see a window shrink to go into the expose mode. I need all of these animations for the desktop use to feel coherent, to feel smooth. If those animations aren't there, I just cannot use that desktop, and that's why I ditched Cosmic after a month. This should be, in my opinion, the absolute priority, plus all the features missing in the apps, but also maybe they need all the foundational work in Epoch 2 to be able to deliver the work in Epoch 3. Now, each epoch is about 6 to 8 months of development, according to System76, meaning Epoch 2 could release with Pop! OS 26.04, and Epoch 3 maybe with Pop! OS 26.10, so we would have to wait about a full year to get all the polish and niceness of a desktop that would, at least for myself personally, let me use it as a daily driver. Now we have some bad news for gaming enthusiasts. It seems that the Steam Machine and the Steam Frame will be delayed a bit. Of course, the reason for that is AI companies, they're gobbling up all the available memory, meaning the prices for RAM and VRAM are insane, and so Valve can't reliably set a price or a launch date. They said they were expecting to have announced the release date and the prices about these new Linux-powered devices by now, but they had to revisit that schedule. They say they still want to ship the Steam Frame, the Steam Machine, and the Steam Controller in the first half of the year, but they can't really disclose any price or release date. They also answered a few questions, saying that the Steam Frame will support streaming services through the SteamOS web browser, so no dedicated apps presumably, but at least you'll be able to watch movies in your VR headset. The Steam Frame should also work for people with glasses, of course depending on the width of the glasses frame. They also said that in their testing, the Steam Machine runs the majority of Steam titles at 4K 60 FPS using FSR, but of course that's game dependent, and in some games you're going to run them at 1440p upscaled, some games will be 1080p upscaled, it depends on the game itself. They'll also open the specs for the Steam Machine faceplates in the future, so people can make their own because they are user removable and replaceable, and they confirmed you can upgrade the RAM and the SSD on the Steam Machine. Now, it is not unexpected. The current landscape for PC is bad. Memory prices are insane, VRAM prices are insane, GPU prices are insane, all mostly because of AI companies trying to build gigantic data centers, and so they gobble up everything that is available. I can't really see a company announcing a set price right now, because it would mean either they could lower it in the future, but then they burned their early adopters for their devices and potentially would have to refund them, even though the device cost them the price that they charged for, or they would have to raise the price in the future as prices keep rising, potentially, a move that is never popular, as we've seen with the Switch 2, with the PlayStation 5, with the latest Xboxes as well. No one likes a price increase on an existing machine, so I can totally understand why Valve would delay those things. It sucks, but that's the world we live in currently. Now, the EU's move away from big tech seems in full swing these days. The European Commission is now trying out an open source system for their internal communications. They're actually preparing a matrix-based solution for their internal use, developed by a non-profit based in London. Which, you're gonna say, London is no longer part of the European Union, because it is in the UK and they left the EU, so the EU Commission still using software that is not being developed in the EU is kind of funny to me, but yeah, at least it's not US big tech software. Now, apparently Matrix is already being used by the French government, which I didn't know about, by some German healthcare providers, and also by some European armed forces. They are not planning to replace all their internal communications with Matrix. They're describing it as a complement and a backup solution, so Teams will still stay for now. That's apparently what they use, but if something goes wrong and they need to drop US-made software, they can move to Matrix instead, and presumably if the trial of this solution goes well, who's to say it couldn't replace Teams in the long run? Currently, the European Commission is also using Signal as their backup to Teams, but apparently it just wasn't suitable for their needs at the scale that they need. The EU Commission is also looking at using Matrix for inter-EU communications, so between different European bodies. On top of that, Estonia is also looking at moving away from Microsoft solutions. It seems to be more of an idea, more of a long-term plan. They haven't listed any specific software they want to replace or what they would replace it with. They haven't even said if it would be open source or not, but they are saying there could be at some point a European decision to block US tech products from being used in federal agencies, so the places where you really want to have full control over what you use, and that would mean every EU country would have to transition to other solutions, so Estonia is looking at what they could use if that ever happened. They say currently one government workstation costs them 2,000 euros each year, 400 of which go straight to Microsoft. That apparently totals up to 6 million euros a year for Estonia, and Estonia is not a huge country in the EU. There's probably a lot more money to be saved at the EU level. It's pretty good stuff seeing those countries start preparing moves away from big tech. If it's open source, it's obviously better. The reasoning for those moves isn't generally the right one, it's more geopolitical based. Instead of just saying, we're using public money, we should have public code paid by that public money instead of taking the public money and giving it to private companies. That would be the right reason to do it, but the end result is the same. More open source, more contributions, more funding towards open source, and that is a good thing. Now, the VP of Engineering at SUSE has published a governance proposal for openSUSE to try and improve how things are run. openSUSE has grown into a pretty big community. They have a bunch of different distros. They have rolling releases, slower rolling releases, semi-rolling releases, stable things, immutable things. They have a shared infrastructure. They have a few downstreams now that they have to manage. And apparently this creates some decision-making problems where no one really knows how you would decide who gets the final say, who works with whom. Basically, a project growing bigger very quickly, and that needs to reorganize slightly to make room for that. Now, the goal is not a takeover from SUSE, it seems. The openSUSE board would stay there, it would have the same attributions, but there would be 2 new elected bodies to work alongside that board. First would be a technical steering committee, which would act pretty much like the one that Fedora has. It would provide direction for project-level technical stuff. It would make sure that the roadmaps are being followed. Second body would be the Community and Marketing Committee, which would focus on organizing events, on growing the openSUSE community, on onboarding new users, on potentially moderating the community spaces. These would all be elected bodies, so the community gets to vote, and everything would be transparent and published openly. Now, it is just a proposal for now. There will obviously be a lot of feedback on how to organize all of that. It doesn't look like what we usually fear in open source, which is big companies spawns an open source project to get some community. Open source projects get a little bit too big and starts capturing some revenue that the initial company wanted. And so they start trying to regulate the open source community to make sure that they can still make their money. This doesn't look like that because what is being proposed seems to be really above board, but you never know. We'll see how it goes and how the community reacts to that. Now, Linux from scratch, which is the do-it-yourself distro, or maybe it's not really a distro, it's more a book, who knows, it's more an instruction manual to help you understand how to build a fully Linux-based system. Well, Linux from scratch decided to only support systemd in future releases. They used to also support sys5 init or system5 init, but they will be dropping it for the next release. The main reason they give is sustainability. Linux from scratch and beyond Linux from scratch, which is an expansion covering a lot more packages, those already support more than 1,000 packages through a book that explains to you how you can compile them, in which order. Supporting system5 init means duplicating a lot of those package checks, a lot of those updates, and apparently it has become fully unmanageable. Basically, it means a lot of the stuff that they cover in the guide has to be done both for systemd and for system5 init, and there's just not enough time to write all of that. The other reason is that most big-name Linux desktops that people are likely to use are meant to use systemd. GNOME currently absolutely depends on it. Plasma will depend on it more with their new login manager, so you kinda need systemd to have all of the features of these desktops. So with Linux from scratch 12.4, the books will no longer give you instructions for system5 init. The older books will still exist, so you can still use the methods that they describe, but they won't be supported, and of course, in time, they will just stop working because the scripts that they propose or the way to install things that they propose will just no longer be up to date. Now, the maintainer for Linux from scratch is not happy about it. He says he would much prefer having multiple options, having more support, more supported ways of doing things, but systemd is just ingrained in about every project because it is practical, it is convenient, it is easy to use. It's not the fastest, it's not the most modular, but it is full-featured and it is a very easy starting point to build a bunch of stuff on Linux, which is why almost every distro uses it, by the way. And if you want to learn how to build a Linux system using Linux from scratch, well, learning systemd is just the way all distros work, basically. So that's the one you want to learn how to configure, install, and use. Still, it is a choice that goes away, and that's never a good thing. Now, the maintainer for Sudo, who's been at it for more than 30 years, has made a call for sponsors to help them fund Sudo maintenance and development. Apparently there's nothing critical going on, the repo for sudo shows it's still actively maintained and updated, our vulnerabilities are being fixed in a reasonable time frame, but I would assume, being pretty much the sole maintainer of such a crucial part of the Linux desktop or just the Linux system whatsoever, server or desktop, it does require a lot of time and it creates a ton of pressure. So seeking financial support to dedicate more time to the project seems reasonable. Sudo is an absolutely mandatory part of every Linux system out there, so I do hope the project keeps going. We do have an alternative in the form of sudo rust, which I don't know if it has the entire same feature set, if it works as well or not. I don't know if it has more maintainers or if it's just maintained by one person, but it would suck to see sudo go into a state of disrepair, and obviously seeking money to pay for that seems reasonable as one of the foundation of any Linux operating system. And speaking of Linux-based operating systems, if you want a computer that runs them properly, well, you have our sponsor, Tuxedo Computers. Tuxedo is a hardware manufacturer based in Germany. They make laptops and desktops that ship to most countries in the world, but specifically they run Linux out of the box. All the hardware has been picked specifically because it has fantastic Linux compatibility. They even write and upstream drivers to ensure that this all works properly. They've got a big range of computers from small form factor laptops all the way up to giant gaming laptops, workstations, you name it. You have plenty of control over the hardware that is inside. You can have your own custom keyboard layout, your own logo engraved on the lid of your laptop. I personally only use their devices. Everything you see from me is made on a Tuxedo laptop, and all the gaming that I do is done on one of their desktops, which is the Tuxedo Cube. So if you want to learn more about Tuxedo Computers, or you need a new PC and you want to make sure that it runs Linux really well, click the link in the description and check out Tuxedo Computers. Anyway, this will conclude today's episode. Thank you all for listening to it, or more unlikely, watching it. You have all the links that I used to write the show down in the show notes. As always, maybe I haven't forgotten them this time, because when I was sick, I did. You have all the YouTube buttons everywhere. You know why you should click them, where they are, and why they're important. Please do leave a comment, even if it's just saying props for the algorithm, or click the like button. And also you have plenty of links down in the description to support this show if you want to do so. Thank you all for watching or listening, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!